Welcome to the Conscious Dominance Podcast, where Andrew and Eric, two dominant men in dom-sub relationships, discuss how we approach our dominant roles from a conscious and loving place, and what we learn about ourselves through the deep intimacy that these power exchange dynamics make possible. Sit back and enjoy the show. Taking responsibility for life, we're taking on more responsibility. It can almost get overwhelming. So it's been really important for me to kind of do what I call systematizing life, to get myself out of like just chasing around catastrophes and putting out fires and dealing with whatever is really urgent in the moment, but to really create some systems and some structure around life for myself and for my sub to make things run more smoothly. So I'm curious what that's been for you and how you've kind of had to work through some of the processes of dealing with all the stuff that there is to do in life.
I know it's one of those things that it's not very glamorous. I feel like it's, it's how you make anything sustainable. Like, how do you make something ecstatic, awesome, last? How do you make something good last? You can't improvise the whole time. You can't just
wing it.
And I think the first thing that occurs to me as I think about this is just the realization, the realization that there is so much to do. Let me finish that sentence. The first step is to realize how much of your life you don't have systems for. And if you become the person that's responsible for every aspect of your life and every aspect of her life to a degree, at least in the direction and the leadership, all of a sudden, the first appropriate response is a bit of overwhelm, is a bit of like, oh shit, there's a lot here to do. And for me, I had to work through my own insecurities, my own issues around how much of my life I still had to clean up. Oh no, she's going to see or become aware of this. And then I can no longer hide things. That's not part of my ethic. That's not part of my integrity. I have to confront them and deal with them. I don't need to necessarily bring this to her, but there is an awareness that all these things have to be done. And so there's a period of time that's just cleaning up your life. And then there's a period of time where you're instituting and creating new systems to establish and create everything from food to workouts to timing to even something that's, it seems like is innocuous, but how do you go out to eat with your woman? Like, we have a protocol. There's a way, everything, any sort of logistical things, we travel, all of those things have created systems. Another way to describe systems is a culture. There's a way of doing, there's a protocol. There's a way that you repeatedly do something. And there's an expectation of that way to do that.
It's why our contract now looks a lot more like a business plan than it does like what you might consider a normal dom subcontract, because it's the same way. We have a code of conduct in our dom subcontract that's the expectations of how we conduct ourselves in different situations of life.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes, you're right. And that what you said, a code of conduct, is a great way of saying it. And it's a code of conduct for her, but it's also a code of conduct for ourselves. Like, we have a code of conduct that we need to live up to. And part of that,
this is a two-way street. It's
for sure.
If integrity is something that I expect out of her, I also expect it out of me.
Correct.
I think a good conscious dom subcontract is really as much or even more about ourselves and what we are held to account for, what our responsibilities are as the dominant, where what you might find in the dumb subcontracts that you find on the internet, if you just search for a template, it's just all the things the sub has to do for the dom.
Now, I I would almost, I don't want to say 100%, but I would say damn near 80% of what I do is just me with me. And then that example, that like it overflows. So then when I'm leading her, there is a natural outgrowth of it. It's not, it doesn't feel false. It feels very true. And it feels like I've already established something. I already have momentum. So she's joining my momentum. I'm creating the momentum already. And so it's just a matter of her coming into that direction that I've already established and I'm already heading in. So if I'm not clear about where I'm going and I'm looking to her for where we are going to go, that's when things get thrown off. I can take her input as a part of what helps me have situational awareness of my life, but it's not going to derail me from the direction that I need to go. And the systems they're establishing, they're, in many ways, they're very similar to gauges that we talked about last week that help you to stay on track.
Yeah. I think about this a lot from the perspective of how I used to live my life when I really considered myself a go with the flow kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't want to be tied down to anything. I didn't want to be committed to something, because then if I didn't follow through on it, I didn't want to be held to account for it.
Truth.
And that's the end, like that's the opposite of the energy of I'm creating something in a life and she now can come inside of my structure.
Correct.
Because if I'm just going with the flow and winging it, just kind of winging my life, she doesn't have anything to follow because I'm not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So this for me has really been a process of coming into some directionality with my life and being willing to say what I stand for and what I want and where I'm going.
Correct.
And then to execute on those things to the best of my ability, but without beating the shit out of myself every time that I don't live up to perfection either.
Correct.
Because it is overwhelming. Like life is busy and there's a lot of shit to do when you're running a business and you've got a full life of friends and things that you enjoy doing. And just managing a calendar can be a big part of being a dom. Just having a calendar
No,
for
it's
your
true.
life and getting done on what day. But
It's true.
have you ever read the book Getting Things Done
Oh yeah.
by
David Allen.
David Allen? Like the getting things done mentality is an important, or I think a valuable way to look at dominance.
Very
You
much.
start taking responsibility for your whole life and putting it inside of some kind of a framework, a time management and organizational framework.
Well, just the basics. What I love about that book, I think it's, and I like that you brought that up, is that it turns stuff, I think is word for, and just the simplicity of clarifying what exactly is the stuff. First of all, it slows everything down. And then clarifying what are the projects in your life. And so your woman is literally a project. It's one of the projects in your life. This is not some insignificant. And within that project, there's a number of other projects that are like I think a great example of what you do that I feel like is really a beautiful thing that I think as far as the system goes, you keep track of her cycle. And that dictates, that's calendar, that's responsibility, that's your being aware of her energy levels at different parts of the month and how it influences sex, it influences dates, it influences health. It has, I would love for you to speak a little bit more about that. I feel like we've touched on that, but I feel like that's a really great place to give as an example for how you are using that information to organize and be systematic in your life.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's an example I hadn't even thought of here, but that's, it's a spreadsheet that I made back in May of 2020. So I'm coming up now in almost 4 years of every single day helping her keep track of her cycle. And when I first tell a lot of guys that I do this, they're like, why the hell do you want to know have anything to do with that? And I list out about 10 reasons why off the top of my hat. Like, okay, you're planning a vacation sometime 3 months from now. Would you like to plan it when she doesn't have her period? Yeah. Okay. Would you like to have a good idea of what days of the month she might be in a bad mood so you can maybe not plan dates or special occasions on those days? Yeah, that might be nice. How about being able to help her manage her own energy and accept her own self so she's not always hating on herself and trying to figure out what's wrong with her? You think that could be helpful? Like, and the list goes on, but I've built this into really every part of our lives because another system or another structure that I use is mapping out both of our workout plans and the exercise we do. Well, for me, I have a pretty consistent schedule that I can keep on a 7-day cycle where I'm working certain things, doing certain things, certain days of the week, because as men, we're roughly the same every day. We go through a 24-hour hormonal cycle, but a woman goes through a 28, 29 day for kind of the normal, at least version of this hormonal cycle where she's different every day of the month. And so her workouts, for example, are very different this week when she's in the last week of her cycle before she gets to her period. So when she's generally lower energy, her workouts are lighter. And I put her through less intensity in her workouts. Right now, while we're talking, she's on the rower that we bring with us in this RV when we travel around the country. And she's just doing a nice, gentle, easy 5K on the rower, which will be like 25 minutes. It's more like just moving her body than it is about any kind of intensity with exercise. So this has also made me learn to be more, I'm going to use your word here, meticulous, because if I want to really learn about her, from her, through her, I can't miss a day. And I've gone almost 4 straight years without missing a day of like being attentive to what it's like for her to be in her body and her system. And it's taught me a lot about her, and it's also helped her to see more of what it is to be her rather than trying to figure out what's wrong with her all the time when she's not the same every day.
And then she can understand that you have her health and body in mind when you make decisions. And she knows that you're considering all these things, and she's aware that you are being conscious of all that.
Yeah, 100%. And it builds a lot of trust, but it also just, from a practical perspective, man, it just helps me make better decisions. But I tell guys this all the time: set yourself up for success. If you have an opportunity to arrange something so that you have the best chance of succeeding, do that. And this gives me 100 different ways that I can do that well, where I can just have us set up for success.
It is the weather. I mean, it's like if you're going to go camping, you're going to look at the weather. You're going to, you know what I mean? You're going to figure out it's going to be stormy then. Not a good time to do this. So I think these systems, I think one thing that brings up for me is when you're thinking about these systems, I use this word situational awareness. And I think that's a really good way of thinking about it. Another way of thinking about this is context. Everything is in context. So depending on the time of day, like you mentioned, that we have our own cycle, where do we have, so the systems that are in place for me, I know that I can think and I can execute, and this is common in the morning much better than I can later in the afternoon.
Yep.
So we have systems in place where we do certain things at certain times of day. Those systems also, like if you have things like you need to clean up your do something with cleaning, it doesn't require a lot of your mind. Do that at night. Do that later in the day. Do that as a way to check it off the list. There's also not only that as far as systems goes, but another thing is I have really been able to use tools such as Trello, such as, these are tools that kind of go laterally and help you, that are often used in a business side. I use this in a personal realm. I use this at home. I use this thinking about Rachel. I use this thinking about our dates. I use this keeping track of things like movies that she loves, that she's mentioned. I take a little notebook and she's just talking. She loves to speak. I'll take notes literally when she's talking. I know that sounds wild, but it does wonders for her to think that I might write something down that she's saying, and then I can note it, and then 2 months later bring it back to her, and she's like, where did you get that I knew or like that? It's because I wrote it down, and then I put it in Trello, movies that she likes, or food, some random cheese that she might like, or a wine, or whatever. So I'm
Yeah.
paying attention to all of that, but then I have a place to put it in, and I can keep track of all this stuff. And I think guys don't realize it's like it's a surefire way to get in and get her lit up in a way where she just is that more supple, that much more open, that much more ready to play, because you've been meticulous in paying attention to what lights her up.
Well, and guys, I know I always had this thought before, like, how the hell do you, like, why do you want me to, or how do you expect me to remember all of these things about you? I've got my own head full of my own shit, right? So, yeah, that's a great example too. And the two of you being newer in relationship, there's a lot of things that you're still learning about each other.
Yeah.
You're still getting, in some ways, you're still getting to know each other. And one of the things that's really tough for a lot of people is just like, if we're moving into a new relationship, or we're moving into maybe a relationship dynamic, like a dominant submissive dynamic, that's going to require more of us or ask more of us as a man. You kind of mentioned this already. There's this resistance because there's, like, I'm already full.
Mhm.
Where do I have room in my life to start taking care of more stuff when it already feels like I'm overwhelmed?
Right.
And and this was one of the things that brought this idea up for me that I wanted to talk with you about, because I think that I know for me that being able to take on more in life has meant I've had to take some things off of my plate, using like automation, using ways to remind myself of things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my God, we use Amazon's subscribe and save,
Mm-hmm.
where you just order something, they give you a 5 or 15% discount off of stuff, and then they just ship it to you once a month.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. I do this. I mean, groceries get delivered, food, everything's systematic. I mean, with technology now, there's no excuse. We don't have to spend so much time doing a lot of things that are on repeat. If we know we need this thing at this certain time, then we can do that. And Rachel's so great with that already. So I've just seen that she's already got this knack, and she helps with that. So I'm like, okay, let's just put that on there, get that going, so we don't have to be thinking about that and talking about that. We don't have to talk about logistics. A lot of couples sit there and they talk about logistics all the time when they get together. When we get together, we have a way with using text messaging and using Trello and using these other things to deal with logistics, or we even set aside, it sounds weird to say this to the couple, but we have meetings where it's like a business meeting. It's like, okay, this is a meeting to talk about our week and where things go and the plan, and it's tight. So that
Yep.
way, when the week happens, we don't fucking have to talk about it anymore. And when I see her, we get to be in like an energy that's charged, that feels lit up, where she feels very subby and she feels in this energy because we've already dealt with the shit that she might be worried about. We pre-think that out so that when that comes up, that day comes up, I know these are some concerns that she has. And so, and even prior to another thing that I really try to do with her is if I see her in a state and we have a scale, like a 1 to 10 pain scale. I have a stress scale. I've established this like, okay, where are you at in the scale? Give me a number. Because she didn't always tell. And then once it's there, I can kind of assess what's happening in that moment. Because the worst thing is she gets too much stress and starts shutting down. So we got to take the stress off. How to go about doing that, because you want to be the one to bring the stress on. You know what I mean? You want to be able to be, so if you don't want her to collapse in that. You want to decrease stress so you can be the one that directs the stress and pulls it back or dials it in. And that comes from holding the container of life, because women have a sense of understanding everything that's going on in the home. So you then start having to be this one to be at least aware of all the things that she's holding, all the things that she's doing. It's not to say you have to do them all, but you should be responsible and know if she's doing it, who's doing it, when it's happening. And if you're reinventing the wheel every week, then your life, you feel like you're in a dysfunctional business or a restaurant where no one's got their shit together. It sucks. You want to be able to have where you can just do your flow, do your thing, and the product of your life is like good times. It's fun. It's life. It's juice. That should be there. And then also support for you as you move forward and move in life.
Yeah, you're not thinking about the basics. Like, if you want to, like, just a standard boilerplate conversation in a suburban married couple's home, it's what time do the kids have to get to the thing? And what time do I have to leave for work? How long is it going to take us to get from here to there? It's just figuring out logistics of life. And then where is the playfulness? Where's the sexy conversation? Where's
exactly. And
you're so tied up in like meaningless shit. But do that for 20 years and see what's left of a relationship. There's not much.
Exactly. And like we have different protocol. Like at dinner, when we go to dinner at night, I expect that the dinner's going to be made. It'll be set. She's going to look good. Whatever that means, there's going to be some kind of she brings a fresh attitude. We start at a certain time. We eat together. We know who's making it, whether it's me or her, or it's being ordered. We're not discussing that, figuring that out. That's already been established. There's a specific time. There's a bit of old school feeling to it. Like there's a bit of kind of traditional when it gets down to it, because it feels good. When we go out, I always pay. When we go out, I always open doors. When we go out, I decide where we're going to go. I might inquire, but I'm the ultimate decider of what we're going to do, when we're going to go, when we're going to leave, all of those things. It's all clear. There's a system. It just works like that. And then it's my fault if things go wrong, and she loves it. And she gets able to just kind of drop into that and feel that. And, I wanted to bring up something as well that I don't think a lot of guys, at least I had to work on this. And now I'm going to talk about this meticulousness and this organizing. Another part of this, I'm going to use the example of going out. I have been somebody who's prone to checking women out when I'm in public. My eyes will just look, right? And
So you're a guy.
What?
So you're a man.
Yeah, but man, I look, right? I see it. I'm like, just notice. And my energy shifts. This has been one of the biggest things for me. There's been a lot of things I've had to work, but I didn't realize how much I did that. Like, I love looking at women. I love just the look. I just will see and notice in these things. And so we're at a restaurant and everyone's like, and then my intention goes elsewhere. And this has been something that I've had to, like, she called me out. She's like, here, like, look, and it's been something that I've had to kind of work. And it's not just like, okay, blinder, focus. It's energetic. It's like really bringing this attention. So I'm literally holding her and her attention so she can receive and she can enjoy. And so my capacity to hold her in that space, it's not just about paying and doing these things. It's also about really being the one who's alert for the situational awareness so that she can go out there and she can look around, and I'm checking who's looking at her, and I'm escorting her, I'm holding her, I'm how we're going through the restaurant, how we're walking, all of those things. And I'm not having a leaky gaze. Like it's like a leaky kind of energy. And it's the same kind of thing that I've really been working in all parts of my life, and it's done wonders. She has so appreciated it. It's radically changed our life.
So how have you systematized that? How have you made yourself more meticulous in the implementation of that? Because it's, it might sound like a good idea to bring more of your attention to your woman when you're with her.
Here's the way I did it. I told her to tell me when I didn't do it. That's the systematization, some is accountability. I was like, I want you to call me out. Like, I want, when you feel my energy is not with you, let me know. She's never a bitch about it. She's not unkind in the way, but she'll just kind of like, and she'll just, and that, she doesn't, but that is the system. There's there is this quality of kind of a mirroring that has really helped me to be focused. And in that focus and in that tension that I've been able to give her, she's lit up and been that much more supple and open. And our dates and our times together have been so much richer. But that is, so the system, when we talk about systems, it's also another way of saying it. There's an ethic to it. There's a way of being. There's an order. There's a structure. There's an expectation. And there is a discipline. Like this, you want a woman that's submissive in all these ways and full of life and full of energy, you have to sacrifice something. It's the way it works. This is the law of the universe. You can't have something without sacrificing something. And the thing you're sacrificing is this part of you that's sloppy. You cannot be sloppy in your attention. You can't be sloppy in your attention to the stuff in your life. And you can't be sloppy in the way that your energy and your attention to her.
And being sloppy or being the go with the flow kind of energy in your life, to me, is where a lot of time gets wasted. It's where like you're just kind of floating through life without some sort of order to your life, without putting some guardrails around your life and set some expectations for how you're going to show up and what you're going to do. I'm doing this with one of my clients right now. We're making a new bucket list. Each of us are, but it's not a bucket list of things we want to do. It's a bucket list of new habits that we would like to have.
Right.
Like, I would love to have these 20 habits all as regular parts of how I go about living my day-to-day life. Because if all these things were just habitual for me, it would make all of my life run so much more smoothly.
Right.
Like, I gave him this piece of homework. I'm like, hang on, I'm going to do that with you because that's a good one. I want to do that one
I like
too.
that. That's a great, it's a work in progress. I'm not someone who, by all means, no one has ever called me, somebody who's always orderly or always clean. This is not something that comes easily to me or naturally to me. But what I want to say is that this has elicited this from me. Like, this is changing me. Because there's a reward. There's reason for it. And you see the reason, you see the feedback. And there is a neural change. My brain and my whole system, my whole way of being is shifting in this. And I feel it.
So I want to talk about some specifics, some examples of ways that I go about using systems in my life. And I'm going to start outside of the relationship, because using systems and making things more automated or more structured or orderly in the parts of my life outside of the relationship is what has cleared up the space and the energy for me to bring more of me into the relationship. People ask me all the time, how do you do this? Not only do Dawn and I live this relationship 24/7 with each other, we travel half the year in a 200 square foot camper where we're driving around the country. So we're in close quarters with each other. We talk about a relationship for a living all day, every day, and we live this dynamic. So, I mean, our relationship is in everything all the time. And people are like, how do you do that? How are you that enmeshed in that all the time? And it really comes from being clean in the way that I run my life. So a few examples, and I'll be curious to hear a few of your more specific ones too, but a few examples for me are things like maintenance of automobiles, having a regular schedule on which I change the oil and I get the tires rotated, because I do most of my vehicle maintenance myself, but I just have a regular um, schedule that I do that stuff on. And sometimes it means that I'm changing the oil before it might necessarily need to be changed, but it's more important to me not to have to think about it and keep track of it, to know that on the fourth of the month, on every third month, I change the oil. I just picked a day because I knew I need to change it once every 3 months. And so all sorts of things with the vehicles to just keep them well maintained. There's a system, there's a structure, it's on the calendar, and I don't have to think about it. I just need to execute around vehicle maintenance. There's a lot of stuff I do with my business in automating marketing. I use this app that I started using in the last few months called ManyChat that lets people do stuff like send me a direct message with a word. And when they send the message with that word, it will respond to them with and send them something or collect their email address so I can send them a free resource or something that we built. So it automates a lot of marketing, and then I can automate a lot of follow-ups. So a lot of the marketing stuff for my business can be more automatic and systematized rather than me just having to constantly be interacting with people. Same thing with home maintenance, changing furnace filters. I give blood every 8 weeks. So I have a system for how I go about doing my blood donation and setting up the next appointment for the next blood donation. And what it really creates for me is a life where all of the little mundane details, they aren't just pre-planned for the week. Because I sit down every Sunday. This is another system. I sit down every Sunday and I do kind of what you said. I lay the week out and I do the things about life. I also do the things about our relationship and like how we're spending our time when we're recording podcasts, all of our appointments for our business. I just lay the week out, and then we do the same thing where it's a meeting where we talk about what's happening for the week. So that's another system that I use is I have a list. I think it's 27 different things I do on Sunday that I sit down and I just go through the list real quick, make sure I've got everything looked at. And for example, if my oil change date falls on a day that I've got a lot of other stuff going, then I might bump that to a different day of the week for the sake of flexibility. So this is what keeps me from being stuck in those conversations every day about what's going to happen when and how, and all the logistical details of life are already figured out. They're already planned out so that we can be more in the energy of being present with each other. So I'm sure I'll come up with a couple more, but what are some of the things that you've systematized about life, and how do you go about it and how do you keep track of it?
Well, one of the most important things for me is I have this little book that I carry with me. I mean, I have my phone, people use that, but I just like writing things down. It helps me to remember. It also feels like I'm not, like if you're on your phone, it looks like you're not paying attention. Whereas this, I don't know, I just like it. So everything goes in here. And this habit started from when I was doing construction, when I had my own construction business and I was needing to buy materials every day and take notes and do things and just jotting down notes for that. I also put my workout in here. I put everything in here. And like the GTD method, it's a capture. You know, I capture everything. And then it goes to here. And then from here, then it spawns out to create what next? And so I use Trello, like I mentioned before, and I use those boards, and I have a Trello board I call boss mode, which is where I kind of get my day dialed in, get my week dialed in. And then I have a home base, another Trello board that I use where I'm working with ideas that I'm kind of floating. So, and I also, because Rachel is also on Trello, we're able to kind of use that as kind of this place where we can kind of be in an open area of creating, because we're both creative people and artists. And so there's a tendency with both of us where we can just spawn so many different things. And how do we want to bring them to fruition? So the calendar becomes really important. And also just these very basic things, but prioritization becomes a very important system, like spending time often making sure that what's on your calendar, what you're doing is your priority. Like if you decide your priority is your body and your health, and you look on your calendar and you look at what you're spending money on, and there's no money spent on your health or on your body, and you're spending money on other things that have nothing to do with that, it's calling yourself out. And it goes back to a previous conversation that we've had about showing up in what we might call like a housing inspector, an inventory of ourselves. So one of the systems that's been very helpful for me is every single day, something that you do too, but I check in with myself. I check in with myself when things are going well, and I check in with myself when things are going bad, especially when things are going bad, but especially when things are going well. And that check-in time is very much a combination of what somebody might do, where you're listening, you're paying attention, you're recording, I'm deducing, am I going in the right direction, or am I needing to shift? What's off? And I don't wait till things get really bad. I do this on a regular basis, and I build that into my day. And I think that's been a very helpful thing for all of this. I think another system or another something that I do that has been really, really helpful is that just a mindset that says that when things are off with Rachel and I, or I'm triggered, a couple things with that. One, it's on me. I need to separate myself from her. We even have a word. It's like we just need to part ways. And it means like timeout kind of thing. And I need to bring myself back so that I can come back and not be in a defensive, not be in a triggered sort of state. That's a system. Like it's a way of being. And part of that is a follow-up that I write. I write every day, 750 words every single day. It's my therapy, free write kind of thing. And I often will use that 750 word time to do an action report where I'll look back and say, what went wrong? What happened? Why was I triggered? What's going on with my life? Oh, that fell off. And that system is a constant system that's allowing me to not let things fester, so that there's no festering. There's no negative shit that's festering between she and I and in my life. And I can kind of look at that. A lot of the things that the basic foundational things, I'm still establishing. We've recently just moved. We're recently come together. So there's a lot of those things that are still, I would say, in play. But most important for me are the systems that hold my interior, that allow me to stay erect, that allow me not to just kind of fall flat, where my energy level, my health, my body. Workouts are really important to me, keeping track of those, making sure that I'm always looking towards some sort of accountability with the workout is really important. So all of those things play a part in kind of creating, I feel like, an ecosystem that feels solid.
There's a couple of internal systems that I use that you might like or learn something from. One of them is I've been very explicit in writing out what are my values? What are my core values? What are the things that I stand for that matter to me? And I put them in order. What is my highest priority? What is my highest value? What's the most important thing for me? So when I sit down on Sundays, one of the things on this 27-ish point checklist, I keep saying 27 or 28, or because it changes from time to time as I see how I need to run I call this King's Corner, because I approach all of this work like I need to see my life as my kingdom. Everything about my
Right.
life is the kingdom, and I'm its king. And so if I'm going to reign over my life or preside over my life, I need to be tuned into what's going on. And this is the time when I go back, sit with myself, and make sure that I've got everything straight for how I'm running it. So one of the things I do every Sunday is I look at that list of my values. I just look at it and I consider things like integrity, freedom, authenticity, that are my highest values, that mean the most to me.
Are those your top three?
Those are my top three, yes. Not in that order. Integrity is my highest value and the thing that I place above everything else. Authenticity, freedom are numbers 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
So then I look at everything else that I do and everything I'm planning out with my life, with my relationship, with my business. Am I actually living my life in a way that is in alignment with my values or not? If not, what do I need to start changing or looking at or shifting or reconsidering?
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I keep myself in check with what my values are and how my life is actually reflecting them or not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another really, really inane and simple, basic thing is our grocery list.
Mm-hmm.
So I use this as an example quite a bit with this, because if you're looking for something where you want to systematize your life, look for what annoys the hell out of you, what
Mm-hmm.
just gets stuck in your craw, what just bugs you about life, and find a way to make that annoyance go away with a new way of doing something.
Mm-hmm.
Bring order to what feels chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
You find chaos, find order. So we have a grocery list now that just operates on a very simple um, checklist that we always have available. And Dawn keeps it on her phone. And every time that we run out of something or running low on something, we already have a list of all the things that we generally buy, and it's organized by section of the store. And
Mm-hmm.
so I will just tell her, like I did earlier today, put powdered sugar on the grocery list. And she
Mm-hmm.
grabs her list, she finds where powdered sugar is on there, she checks it. And then when we go through the store, then we're just going through, we've got a list of everything we need. We uncheck it off the list. And now we have a very simple way of keeping track of stuff. We don't forget to buy things that we need, because that was always an issue for us before, was just remembering the damn grocery list and remembering to put things on it.
Yeah, that don't underestimate a list. Like lists, checklist. There's a great book called The Checklist Manifesto. I think it's called The Checklist Manifesto, but it's about checklists and it's about the medical world. It's by a doctor and he's trying to get the use of checklists into surgeries. And he uses the example of airplanes. And he also uses the world of construction and engineering and where they use checklists and how effective they are. And I love your example on Sundays of a checklist. I feel like checklists, don't underestimate these really basic things, are really, really helpful because it's basic things repeated that is compound effect. I mean, that's successful business, but that's also successful religion, successful relationship, successful life is basic things repeated.
Yep. And
That's
and then slow general improvement.
yes. It's basic things repeated as a foundation with, like you said, these certain little growths, these certain little things that can improve or just something can expand and grow from that. And you have to have both. Like we have to have the structure that's a baseline, that's a foundation.
So inside of our relationship, a couple of ways that I go about the managing of the dom sub dynamic is, again, also on Sundays, I review our contract. I read it once a week just to remind myself of what I've committed to. And if I'm going to hold her accountable, rather than her having to try to remember to hold herself accountable, then I need to have top of mind awareness to exactly what it is that I'm asking of her, so that there is some structure to how I'm managing and leading our dynamic, what the rules are that we're operating under, what are the rituals that I've created for us, and why, the why behind them, to stay connected to those things. I mentioned already, but I lay out Dawn's workouts for her. And I also make a meal plan for how we're going to manage our meals for the week. Now, some of this stuff adjusts and changes on the fly, because we may get to Thursday and have leftovers from Tuesday that we need to eat. So I don't get rigid with this stuff. It's real easy to start systematizing things and then get overly rigid and kind of get almost bound up in the system and let it own you, instead of it working for you. You end up working for it. But creating a meal plan then helps me create a shopping list.
Mm-hmm.
And with both of those things, Dawn loves to cook. She loves to cook for me. She's a fantastic cook. And if there's one thing that I always know will light her up, all I need to do is ask her to cook something for me. That, because she loves to do it. She loves that I love her cooking. It's such a simple and easy thing where she gets to serve me. And
Yeah, Rachel loves to cook too. And we're so fortunate to have women that love to cook for us.
and I love to cook too.
Yeah, I
So
do.
it's it's actually kind of fun, because there are times when we both want to cook dinner for each other, and you know, that's a fun argument. I'm going to cook this tonight. No, I want to cook that on Thursday.
Right,
So
right.
she will give me input as to things she's maybe wanting to cook. This week it was chicken wild rice soup, was something that she wanted to make this week. So then I structure and order the meal plan for the week. Then she doesn't have to think about what, like, do we have all the groceries? Because now I need to go through the meal planning list and make sure we have all the food we need, and schedule a grocery shopping trip if we need it for the food that we're going to cook. So those are some of the little ways, like, again, systematizing the pieces of our relationship, and even the pieces of our dom sub dynamic, so that things don't get dropped. We hear this from couples a lot, where they used to do dom sub and they just kind of lost connection to it, where they just kind of fell out of the dynamic. That's it's easy to do if it's not built into a part of how you live your life.
Yeah, it's got to be cultural.
There's that word again.
Yeah, well, because we can have all these systems, but there's got to be a culture of it. You know, when you go to a country, you know what the culture is. There's a way of being. We're creating a culture. Culture is a good word, because you feel it. You know, when you're in it, you feel something different. When you go to different parts of the country, you feel a different energy. It's energetic. I would love, I feel like one of the big things too that I want to say, we've talked a lot about systems that are external, and I've talked a little bit about how do we have these systems that kind of clarify our internal. And I've talked about being more meticulous with my energy. I think one of the biggest things, and I think we'll talk about this on a whole other podcast, but just introducing men to the idea of energy and what their energy is. And that if you can maintain, what is it, a system to maintain the proper energy? Because a lot of the DS relationship happens without any words, without anything being said. It's energy. And women feel this. They feel the energy. a lot of men love to say, oh, it's the alpha or whatever, this, the alpha and the omega. But this energy, you can, by taking responsibility for your life, by working to move to take away the victim mindset, you will shift your energy, and women will feel that. And when you stop being defensive, when you can hold them when they're in their state, in a space that feels where they have the room to be, where you can focus and bring your energy to them, they can feel that. It's not something about telling them what to do. And this is so much about what you speak about and what you are, but I feel like the systems are all there ultimately to support the right energy. And the energy is cultural. There's a culture is just really how the energies relate habitually. What's the habit of relationship? What are the relationship dynamics? What are the power dynamics that are on repeat? That's the culture. And when those things are not clear, or where those things are off, or where they're in fluctuation, you don't have a culture. And what happens when you don't have a culture is you adopt the culture that's around you or from your past. And that's most likely not a culture that you want to be living. Sometimes it is, but for a lot
This,
of,
yeah, that's a fantastic point, and it's really interesting to hear you talk about it that way, because the way I talk about this is I have to have a vision for the relationship. I have to know where is it that I want us to be together? What do I want our dom sub dynamic, our marriage, our love for each other, our sex life? What do I want this to look like 5 or 10 years down the road? Like, where am I going? What do I think is possible between us?
Mhm.
So that these different ways that I go about creating these more day-to-day ways of living aren't just going through the motions, but they're in support of something. They're directional.
Mhm.
They have a purpose or a reason, and they're helping me to create something better. Because again, back to something you said at the beginning, I have to be going somewhere in order
Mhm.
for her to come into my leadership, into following me. I can't just ask her to be a submissive and now she's submitting to me while I'm going through the motions and going with the flow, bro.
'Cause otherwise she's submitting to your whatever bullshit you're dealing with. Like, you're not to be trusted. I feel like I'm not to be trusted in my little up and down. What I need are, like you said, you need these values. You need something that you're steering towards so that she's surrendering to you in those values. When you're living those values, she's not surrendering to you in your flippant moments that you are being mercurial and you're kind of just that energy. She doesn't trust. She wants to trust an energy that's lined up, that's directional, that's moving forward.
Congruent. And this is the thing, you to have congruence in your life means to have your internal life line up with your external life. And in order to have that happen, you need to know what your internal life is, and you also need to have some direction with your external life. You need to be going somewhere. So this is the bigger point or the bigger picture around this is the way that I say this is she can't surrender into a void. She can't surrender to me if I'm just empty, if there's nothing to me. But
Right.
it's about congruence with an inner world and outer world
Right. Yeah. Well said. Because otherwise
standing
it's
for.
entitlement.
Yeah.
That's entitlement. When you feel like you're entitled to her surrender, like you want her to surrender to you just because there's an entitled feeling from that. And
Well,
that
what it is, I
corrupts you.
think, what it is, I think, is that's where guys will try to use dominance to end their woman's submission just to soothe their little wounded inner child
For
and to
sure. That's that's the pitch. I mean, that's the entire history of power.
yeah,
Power corrupting, you know?
it's using this authority that a woman who loves you is willing to grant you in her life. And then if you just take that and use it to like help you live without having to face your shit and live according to your whims, it's this is just, again, I'm going to use this word congruence or
It's a good
directionality
word.
to just describe the type of man who's going to inspire a woman's submission, to like make her actually want to follow you,
Hmm.
because you can give her something to want to be a part of. But this is just where, and let's be real, the way that life works in 2024, it's busy. There's
Hmm.
so many moving pieces to life that it's really easy to get overwhelmed. And I think this is where a lot of guys really get wrapped up in their own heads, is that they they get overwhelmed with all of this. And that's kind of what the point we're bringing here is, you can bring some order to life by thinking about things a little bit more structurally in how you run your life.
And there's a grace, a simplicity, an ease, a flow, a a an order, a structure that my life is. It feels very much, there's a harmony of the baseline. And I've never had that prior to my life with Rachel. All because I've done a dominant submission in very unconscious ways, but to bring consciousness to it is to bring the systems, is to bring the order, to bring the structure, to bring the things that help it, so that there's this, the Spanish tranquilo, like it's there's a tranquilo, like a tranquility that's underneath. We get rid of the drama. We don't
I
have any
was
drama.
I
We
was
don't
just
have
going
any
to
of this
say this
shit
because
that's,
it's like the mental clarity that I have,
oh,
the space that's cleared up in my head when I'm not trying to keep track of so much shit because it's just automated. Like,
yep,
it is like freedom.
right.
It's freedom.
There's, yes, spaciousness is a good word for it. I feel like one thing that's I've also really thought about a lot, and you asked about, is not to be afraid to slow down. There's the whole idea of slow. Like a lot of things that I do, I purposely do things that force me to slow down and bring that to it. So that, because a lot of what gets us in trouble is when we overly complicate, we speed up, we make rash decisions, create systems that are inept or overly complicate things. But what is this idea to just really truly slow down? And I feel like that, like reducing just the amount of things, being really discerning of what we're taking responsibility for, what are we engaging in, what are we doing. I've cut off whole swaths of my life just because I don't want to have to take responsibility for those. And a lot of it has to do with like just being entertained, just being things that aren't producing or conducive to the rest of my life. And that pruning quality is another part of this that allows us to create these systems that are congruent.
I think it was 2016, if I'm remembering right. I woke up on New Year's Day, and this was a stage in my life where I didn't want to make New Year's resolutions because I knew that I would fail at them, and I didn't want to even say that I was going to do something that I didn't trust
Right.
myself to follow through on. But I woke up that morning and I realized that a big part of my problem that I had with following through with things was that I was way overcommitted.
Right.
I had I had created a life where my time was spoken for. When I looked just forward at the year that was to come, and I looked how little of my time was within my authority, versus how much of my time was committed to
Mhm.
jobs, to organizations, to like all the different places that I had already signed up for things. And I made a list and I called and I quit almost everything on the second. I resigned from boards of directors. I quit business networking groups. Anything that wasn't filling my life with joy, I stopped. Like I just quit all of it and I cleared up all the space in my life. And that was early in the process of me starting to get my own life in order because I couldn't get my life in order without going through that slowing down process.
Yeah, you have to have solitary time. If you
Yep.
don't have time for you to check in with you, and that's to me the most important system. The most important system is you, is your body, is your soul, your system. And if
Yep.
that system's not working, all the other systems, you
That's another conversation that I want to have on a future podcast is the doctrine of self-sacrifice.
yeah.
How, men are kind of trained with this idea that we're sacrificial beings and we're just supposed to give ourselves away for the until we're used up by other people. And I cannot subscribe to that doctrine because if I give myself away, if I sacrifice myself, then what is there of me left for myself or anyone else?
Right. And I think that'll be a good conversation because I think there's nuance to it because we are here to be of service. We are here to sacrifice, but we need to do it mindfully.
Yep. And
Yep.
take care of ourselves first.
Yep.
Well, this was great. And for the guys who are listening to this, we would love to hear your comments on how you systematize your life on the YouTube video to this conversation. Leave it in the comments for us and let's get some conversation going about how other guys are doing this. How are you going about making your life more orderly, more structured, so we can learn from each other and come up with some different ideas of what works, what's working for you, and learn from the other guys who are maybe a couple steps ahead of you in this as well.